So hi everybody, my name is Velma Gallant and I want to welcome you to the first ever Living Abundant Joy teleseminars. So I guess what I'd like to start out with is our formal introduction of Dr. Joe Vitale. He's the world's first hypnotic marketer. He's president of Hypnotic Marketing Inc. and author of way too many books, including #1 best-selling book, Spiritual Marketing, the best-selling ebook, Hypnotic Writing, and the best-selling Nightingale Conant audio program, The Power of Outrageous Marketing. His latest books are the best-selling The Greatest Money-Making Secret in History and Adventures Within. He's being called the Buddha of the Internet. So that's the formal introduction. My own personal little add-in here. I've been friends with Joe for almost 8 months now, and he's touched my life a lot in that time. He actually touched my life for the first time about 2 years ago when I first read Spiritual Marketing. The book has made such a difference to me that it's actually one of the gifts that I give out with every single subscription to Welcome Changes. And I'm recommending it to my friends left and right. I even gave a copy of it to my mom. I got to meet him for the first time about 6 months ago, October of last year in LA. And I remember thinking, wow, he really is as nice as he seems in his book. I was able to attend the first ever Spiritual Marketing Super Summit in January, and that experience moved me in ways I could never have imagined. I expected to get a lot of information, but I didn't expect transformation. So I'm honored to be able to call Joe my friend, and I'm honored to introduce you to Dr. Joe Vitale.
What a
Welcome, Joe.
Wonderful introduction. Thank you, Velma. That's very touching. I'm smiling and feeling all warm inside, so thank you. That is great. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I think we're going to start this off with my big wham-bam question. The question for you today is, what is the single most valuable lesson you've learned about abundance, and what makes that so valuable for you?
You know, I knew in advance you would ask that question, so I've had a lot of time to think about it. And at first I thought, I can answer that with one or two things. And then I thought, no, there's more to it. Then I wrestled with it even more. I thought about it all today. I made some notes. And so the reality is, it's a tougher question to answer than what it first looks like. I'm real tempted to give you a simple answer and just say something like, well, if you start practicing gratitude, it will transform everything in your life and you'll start to feel more abundant. And as you feel more abundant, you'll start to attract more abundance. Yet, even as I say that, and that is true, I think there's something larger going on behind it, and I think this larger issue is more of my answer to your question. And that's the idea that we have to be clear inside ourselves of any limiting negative beliefs that would stop us from experiencing abundance. I really think that has been my #1 lesson, because even when I would practice gratitude, knowing that gratitude is a fundamental way of beginning to shift your mindset and your beliefs, I also know that it never seemed to stick, at least in my case, unless or until I had taken care of the beliefs that were in the way of allowing abundance in my life, until I could allow it in my life, until I could accept it, until I knew I was worthy, until I thought I was deserving, until all of these negative, limiting beliefs, self-image type issues within myself were resolved, then even doing the gratitude things were like Band-Aids. They helped a little bit, but they didn't resolve the entire problem. So I'm ending up giving you a longer answer here, but the truth, Velma, is that I believe what I've learned is that we have to take care of the belief blockers. And once we do take care of the belief blockers, then we start to allow the riches that's already there in the universe. We start to see the opportunities. We start to naturally feel more gratitude. And when we start to do all of the other prosperity, abundance, riches type thinking that's out there, that's in all the books and in the tape sets that are in the courses, then they start to take effect. They start to take hold, and we start to live them rather than just read about them. So my basic answer is, what's been the fundamental turning point for me is clearing my beliefs. And that's been important because once I've done it, then everything else started to fall into place.
Okay. Do you have any insight as to how people such as myself can do a little bit of belief clearing?
That's the million-dollar question, so that's very smart that you asked that. That's the natural, logical thing to ask next. And yeah, there are some things. Now, the very first thing that influenced me was the option process, and this was the work of Barry and Susie Kaufman at the Options Institute up in Massachusetts. I had read their books. There's one that's a very famous book, still in print, been in print for a long time. It's called To Love is to Be Happy With. To love is to be happy with. And it documents their questioning process called the option process, which I think they call the option method these days. And I remember reading the stories of people who use this option process to question beliefs in their lives. And as they questioned these beliefs, they were able to heal these at once considered incurable problems that they were experiencing. Everything from autism, which the Kaufmans were famous for because they had an autistic child that the medical people said, you know, you can't do anything with this one, but you have other kids, so focus on them. And the Kaufmans didn't listen to that. They practiced their own option process, this attitude of unconditional love, while they questioned what was going on in their world. And as a result, and I'm oversimplifying it, but as a result, they were able to transform that child, transform their lives, and transform thousands of other people that they've taught this to. So I read their books. I went to the Option Institute. I studied with Barry and Susie Kaufman back in the early 80s, mid-80s, somewhere in that. And it had a profound effect on me. I still use elements of the option process with myself and with others in a kind of a secret way. When people are doing consultations with me, I don't begin to say, I'm going to do the option process and let's question your beliefs. I'll ask naturally some questions that will lead them to questioning their beliefs. So what I'm trying to get at here is that there are methods like the option process that you can use with yourself or another person to begin to ask yourself, do I believe these things that keep surfacing in my mind? For example, if you become aware that everything I do seems to cost me money and not make me money, well, that sounds like an observation on your part as you look at your life. That sounds like you're just looking at the evidence and saying, yeah, I'm spending money and not making any. But that's actually a belief. It's a belief that's become concrete. And as you look at it, you start to realize, oh, that's not the evidence, that's the belief, and you can begin to do the option process and do the first step and say, do I really believe that? And you may, just with that question, dissolve it. You may at that moment realize, no, that's not true. I'm just looking at what I've done recently, and maybe it did cost me money, and maybe it hasn't made money yet, and maybe it will make money down the road. So to say that everything I do costs me money and doesn't make money is not true. And you might let that go. If, for example, you ask the question, do I believe that, and you end up saying, yes, I do believe that. Everything I'm doing, darn it, costs me money. I'm not making money. Then you can ask very lovingly, gently, and curiously, much like a detective would ask, you would say, okay, why do I believe that? And what you start to do is unearth your own evidence. Because the reality for me is we live in belief-driven universes. We're belief creators, and everything that we have around us is a result of our beliefs. So what we want to do is go under the surface there and find out, all right, where do the beliefs come from? Why do we believe it? And can we choose to believe something else? So I have done a lot of the option process work. I strongly encourage people to read the books of Barry Neil Kaufman, like To Love is to Be Happy With, and become a little familiar with that whole process, which is basically a Socratic questioning process that's done with deep love. You're not criticizing yourself. You're just curious. Where do those beliefs come from? Why do I believe those? Do I want to keep believing those? What would serve me better to believe than what I have been believing? I can give you a personal example that's coming up in my mind right now, so I'll go with it. A lot of people have the belief, and I had this one for years too, that as you spend money, you lose money. The more money you spend, the broker you get. I mean, it seems like a very common and even mathematical observation that you look at your life and you say, yeah, if I write this check and I spend this money, I won't have any more. What I did years ago was ask myself, is that really true? And I started to look at it much more metaphysically, and I thought, well, it's true to the extent I believe it. What would be a better belief for me to have? And I actually took on this belief that says the more money I spend, the more money I receive. And that's become a mantra in my head. So if I'm writing a check, whether it's to pay bills or to buy things for myself or a loved one or to make a donation, whatever it happens to be, I've got this little thing going on in my head. I've rewired my brain. The new software says the more money you spend, Joe, the more money you'll receive. And so whenever I spend money, I'm on the alert for new money to come in. I've reprogrammed the way that I see opportunities. So now I don't see it from lack, I see it from abundance. That came from changing a belief. So the very first thing here is questioning beliefs and using things like the option process. The other thing that I have found profoundly powerful, I mean, this is dramatic, is the work with somebody who is a type of beliefs counselor, a beliefs coach, if you will. One of the ones I've worked with has been Mandy Evans, and Mandy Evans is out in California, and she's actually a option process instructor. She does her own version of it, but she's got this wonderful light in her eyes and this vibe to her personality that she's just enjoying life, and she's there as this, I almost want to say, this angelic being who looks at your life very detached but very loving, very caring, but not wrapped up in your own drama. And she can ask questions about, why do you believe these things? What would you prefer to believe? And I have found by having somebody outside of you, not doing it yourself, not doing it as one personality talking to another personality within yourself, but having this professional beliefs coach or beliefs counselor, beliefs therapist, whatever you want to call it, having somebody like that stand on the outside of you and hold the mirror up and say, here's what you're saying, here's what you're believing, what would you prefer? That has caused profound changes in my life. And people often ask me, how do I stay clear, stay focused, stay energized, keep going for my dreams? It's because I have people like Mandy Evans and Ann Taylor Harkis and some of the others that I mentioned in the back of my spiritual marketing book. I have these people to call on. So when I want that clearing or I feel myself start to lag a little bit, I call one of them and I start to do this belief process. So to answer your question, Vilma, there's a couple things right there. The option process, questioning your own beliefs in whatever way that works for you, and there's other ways to do it besides the ones I've mentioned. And, of course, working with a coach, somebody who's not wrapped up in your drama, who can see it much like you would watch a TV show. They're just kind of entertained by it and want to know how you created it and then advise you or help you advise yourself on how to recreate it.
Perfect. Actually, reading it in your book was actually about the third time that I bumped into the option process, and I decided I'm going to take a little closer look at it myself.
Yes, I love the option process. Barry and Susie Kaufman are creating miracles. I think their place is even called A Place for Miracles. That's what the sign said back in the 80s when I went there for their training. I remember they live on this giant 80-acre, countrywide, beautiful, mountainous estate, and their sign as you enter, it says A Place for Miracles. And that is indeed what they're doing.
Great. Okay, I have another question for you. I spent quite a bit of time flipping through it, reading through Adventures Within, and I got a ton of information out of it. One of the things that stood out for me that you shared in your book was you said, and I'll quote you, "I am in love with creativity, and I believe I am here to inspire creativity in you and in everyone else I meet. Creativity is simply an inexpensive high which can transform your life. It's a soul drug." Can you say more about that?
I'm kind of, well, first of all, people listening should realize you're reading from a book called Adventures Within. That was a book I wrote probably 20 years ago. I released it only within the last 6 months because so many people had written to me after spiritual marketing and after reading The Greatest Money-Making Secret in History, and they would ask me, what's your whole journey? What's your story? What's your autobiography? So I went and dusted off this old book, which chronicled a lot of things that I did back in the 70s and 80s, everything from Werner Erhard's forum training to having breakfast and seminar experiences with Stuart Wilde to my training with Barry Neil Kaufman, to my years with a controversial guru, 7 years of that, and also doing work with Robert Fritz in The Path of Creativity, and I think that quote is actually from that chapter as I remember it. So anyway, you are reminding me of something I wrote 2 decades ago, and I have to think back to, what was I thinking when I wrote that? Now, But it's kind of cool because it's still me, and I still believe that. I mean, creativity is this kind of a soul drug. I don't remember ever using that expression before, but apparently I did at some point. And I like it. It is a kind of soul drug. It is a kind of high. And I think if I needed to put that in terms so that anybody with any kind of talent or interest that's listening to this call could understand, I'd say it's more than just being a writer or being an artist or being the obvious things that we think of when we think of somebody being creative. I think it means being creative in your life no matter who you are. And that could be the guy who's driving the taxi cab or digging ditches, or he's the car salesman, or it's the woman that's, I don't know, running a real estate office. I don't know what it is. It's different for every person. But they can be creative in whatever they're doing. I think there's great abundance laying for people to pick up, just like the gold in the streets once we open our eyes and we can see it, once they start to be creative in their life path. Now, there's a couple thoughts that I guess I need to clarify that are bubbling up as I say all this, and it's the idea that I believe we all know what our path is. I believe on some level, deep within ourselves, there's this internal guidance system, and it gives us little bumps if we start to go off of our main path. And those little bumps could be anything from your house burning down to having a car accident or getting ill. And I think being ill is one of the most common ones. People that are going to work that they hate often get sick. Well, I rarely get sick. And a couple decades ago, when I was working at a job I hated, and I got sick quite a bit, while I was listening to metaphysical tapes and self-help tapes, and remember even listening to Dr. Robert Anthony's old tapes called Beyond Positive Thinking, the ones that I just resurrected and re-recorded. I was listening to those a couple of decades ago, and he had mentioned in there that if you were getting sick, if you were getting things like the flu, then a part of you was trying to escape your reality. You didn't like it because you knew that on some level it wasn't right for you. So I'm trying to suggest that each of us, no matter who you are and what you are doing, you know when you're ruthlessly honest with yourself, you know in the gut, in the marrow of your bones, what your life direction is. And that what you want to do is get on that path. I have learned that when you do get on that path, things start to be much easier. You may still have a little bit of snags or challenges, but they're not as devastating. They don't stop you. They don't even really slow you down. They become these little puzzles that you need to figure out to achieve whatever it is that you're here to do, whatever it is that you select. So I have found that just going for your dreams and doing it with great creativity is exhilarating. That is when life is zestful. That's when life has gusto. That's when you're doing what you love and you're having fun with it and you're being creative in that role. And again, that creativity is going to take whatever shape you want it to take. I'm a great believer in just making things up. I mean, I'm the guy who created these E-classes 5 years ago, these high-ticket E-classes that, as far as I know, nobody else had ever created. Nobody's ever contradicted me on saying I created them. And the only reason I created them is because I wanted a luxury sports car. So in order to get it, and I was playing with possibilities, and I was being creative, I just made up an E-class. And then I made up the price for it. Then I made up the lessons. I mean, this is nothing but creativity. So I think the real secret to enjoying life is to pay attention to that internal guidance system, to do what you love, and to be as creative as you feel comfortable in doing, because that's where the abundance is. You'll surprise yourself as well as everybody else with the fun things that you'll create. And then when you create them, you'll quickly learn that you can charge people for them, and you'll start to make money with them. Anyway, I'm giving you a long answer, so I better shut up and let you go to the next one.
That's okay. Another thing, I'm going by this book just because it's one that I just read very recently. You were talking about Richard Haight, and something that you shared in there kind of stands out for me as definitely touching on abundance. Some of the questions that Richard would ask a client and asked you, I'm guessing, anything is possible if you stick with your intention despite your fears. The trick is to learn not to mind that you have fear. What you want to do is transform the fear into personal power through a loving relationship with your higher self. How good can you stand your life? How much are you willing to accept right now? Too many of us are afraid to accept goodness. You believe you don't deserve it, and you push it away. The universe is bestowing gifts on us all the time. Are you accepting them?
Wow. I'm going to start to feel like this is a therapy session in a minute, because these are bringing up people and events from my past. Richard Haidt, I haven't thought of his name or him in 20 years. Wow. Okay, well, Richard was a therapist in the Houston area, and I met him because he was doing the fire walk when fire walking was the rage. Tony Robbins was doing fire walks, and there were other people doing fire walks around the country, and the one I found that was doing it closest to me was Richard Haidt, and so I met him through that. So it becomes a little clearer why he made the statement there about going with your intentions despite your fears, because that's what you have to do in order to walk across a bed of hot coals. The reality is, when you make the fire for a fire walk, which I very clearly remember doing, when you have this backyard of somebody's house and there's no fire there in the backyard, and you go and you build a fire and you watch it burn and you feel the heat, and then you start taking all the logs and all the coals and you make a bed, and you're still feeling all the heat and you're sweating from it because it's all very real, it becomes incredibly scary when you finally stand in front of that bed of hot coals that you made yourself. It is very real. So having the intention to walk across it, pretending that your feet have slippers on them, or pretending the old Tony Robbins thing of imagining that the coals are cool, what was it, cool green moss or something like that, that becomes a real challenge because the possibility of being burned there is real. I don't know how real it is scientifically, but in your psyche, you know it is real. And knowing that other people have walked across the coals and some of them have been burned is also very real. So all of that's on your mind, and certainly was on my mind as I stood before those coals and thought, okay, my intention is to walk across these things and not be burned, which isn't even the clearest intention. You want to walk across those things safely and easily and joyfully. To walk across them and not be burned still leaves the command in there, be burned. So we want to be careful when we state intentions. So anyway, I remember all of that. I remember having those fears, and I remember Richard having said that statement about not minding the fears, to be able to walk through your fears and to your intention, to your goals, no matter what else was there. And so in my case, as I started to walk across those coals, I remember walking across and they felt like I was walking across peanuts or walnuts. I felt them crunching under my feet, and I thought, well, this is pretty cool. And then halfway through, I had this thought, I should be burned. And at that very instant, I was burned. I quickly turned that thought into, no, safety, and walked across the rest of the way without being burned. But I did get a little blister, and I did get it at the moment I had the thought, I should be burned. So there was a couple things being taught to me. One is about the power of intention, one about walking through your fears, and one about the power of your own thoughts. That a little thought, like I could be burned or I should be burned at this moment, will cause it in that moment, especially when there's nothing else to conflict it in that moment. When you're thinking about fire walking, you are walking on fire, and you have the thought, I should be burned. Well, there's nothing else wandering around in your mind at that point. You're so focused that the intensity of the thought makes it happen instantly. And the other thing that Richard said that you quoted there was about how good can you stand it. And that's one of my favorite questions that he used to ask, and I occasionally will ask it of somebody, because we do seem to have some kind of ceilings within our belief system about what we will allow ourselves to receive. In other words, in my own particular case, because my family struggled quite a bit, and my father was the breadwinner, an ex-Marine, very macho, ex-boxer, pretty much controlled the household and everybody in it, and certainly controlled the finances, and worked for all the money, and there wasn't very much, and there were times when, I don't know if we were starving, but it was certainly hard to get food or hard to get some of the things we want. We take on some of the beliefs like there isn't enough, or you have to work for all of the money, or even something like somebody else has to get it for me. In the case of growing up, it could be your parents. And we take these beliefs on naturally. We just kind of are sponges, and we soak them in without any sort of concern or any sort of critical faculty, because we're kids, we're babies, we're growing up. Well, we become adults, and that software programming is still there. And this is another one of those things we need to belief explore and release in order to have more. For the longest time, it was very difficult for me to make any money doing anything but labor. And that was because I grew up in a labor environment. My father worked on the railroad. He had me working on the railroad when I was 5 years old, doing labor out there, very hard work. I did it for most of my life and through college. So when I finally leave home and leave my family and even move 2,000 miles away, it's still difficult during those years for me to do anything that would make money except labor. Why? Because that's what I was programmed to expect. And so I needed somebody to be able to say you can make money in other ways, and then to prove it, and then to ask me, how good can you stand it? Can you allow this kind of good wealth to come into your life too? So I think we all have these kinds of ceilings where we just kind of begin to rebel our own good. We resist it or repel it because we start to bump up against our own limitation, our own ability to receive. So asking the question, how good can you stand it, and then honestly answering it will begin to stretch what you can receive. I mean, where I live now on the country estate with acreage and the cars I do and, you know, the relationship and the passive income, all the stuff that I have, this is so foreign, so incredibly wonderful of a dream to the Joe Vitale who was alive 30 years ago in Houston and was doing the labor. So I had to stretch my receiving capabilities. I had to change my beliefs to be able to be where I am now. And the other part of this I want you to know is that it doesn't stop here. I still have bigger dreams. There are some other goals that I want to achieve. And where I will be and who I will be when I achieve them will be different than the guy who's sitting here answering the questions now. Because I'm going to continue to work on my beliefs, my mindset, my own consciousness, so I can allow even more good into my life. So how good can I stand it? Well, I can stand it pretty good right now. But can I stand it great? Can I stand extreme luxury and fantastic wealth? Whereas my friend Bob Doyle says, you know, wealth beyond reason. Can you stand wealth beyond reason? I mean, these start to stretch your mind, and I think as we stretch our mind, we start to allow more of the very thing we want.
Okay, that leads right into my next question.
Oh.
Later on in the book, you were talking about valuing your work. If you give away your work, several things happen. People receiving your work don't appreciate it unless there's a price tag on it. You can't create high-quality work because you don't have the funds to contribute to your resources. You begin to lose value for yourself as well as your work.
Yeah.
And I think that ties in a lot with how good can you stand it, because if you're busy valuing yourself pretty darn low, you're not going to be able to.
Yes, that's an important point. I'm glad you brought it up, because I had to go through some pretty tough lessons in order to be okay with charging for what I do, and then charging very, very well for what I do. And I mean, it's been an evolutionary process, because in the beginning I wouldn't charge anything. I would be doing writing, and I think I wrote resumes at one point for people, and I'd either let them buy me a lunch or dinner or a Coke or give me $10. And then I got a job at a place, an executive resume place, and they were charging $200 to write the same resume. And I began to think that, oh, these people are paying it, you know, the clients are paying it, and they are valuing it partly because they are being asked to cough up with money that's meaningful to them. So one of the things I learned is that other people will respect me more if I charge well. I know from marketing that what you charge for something is the perception people will deduce. In other words, the higher amount of money, they'll usually say things to themselves like, wow, it must really be worth it for them to charge that much. Well, it may or may not be worth it, but the perception is that it is. Well, internally, the same kind of perception takes place. So if you give away your work, or you only charge $10 for it, or $15 for it, or a very low amount compared to other people, then other people, including yourself, start to not respect you. So you want to respect yourself. You want to charge for your work. There's a perception taking place inside of yourself as well as with other people. I do know when I was charging like $25 an hour to do a consultation, which to me seems absurd and almost cartoonish when I think back to it, but I was doing that. I would charge $25 for a consultation. And I remember having lunch in Houston at the time with Mandy Evans. She had come to visit, and she was telling me I needed to raise my prices. And I said, what, to $35 an hour? And she raised both of her hands like, go higher, higher. And my eyes got big, and I thought, what, $60 an hour? Like it was the wildest, craziest, most preposterous thing to do. And she said, you are worth it. You have to realize it, you have to allow it, and you have to signal it to others. Well, over time, I raised it even more. And at this point, I charge something like $500 an hour for a consultation, which, depending on who you talk to, is either high or low. There are other marketing people out there who charge under $500, and there are some out there that charged over $500. So a lot of it has to do with my own ability to receive and how good I can stand it, and I'll probably bump it up even more. I remember reading a book a while back, which I'm not going to remember the title, but it had to do with a fellow who specialized in creativity, and he charges big companies to come up with ideas for them. And he said that he used to charge $1,000 for the ideas he would come up with. And a friend of his said, that's way too low. These companies could make millions of dollars off of your ideas. You need to value what you're doing. You need to value who you are. So raise your prices. And the next time he had lunch with a prospect, he sat there, and the prospect said, well, how much will you charge to come up with these ideas for my company? And this guy said, I still remember in his book, he said he held his breath, and he remembered that he wanted to step through his fears. He remembered that it'd be okay if the other person said no, and he said, I want $50,000. I want you to pay me $50,000 for my ideas. I'll come up with ideas, but it'll cost you $50,000. And the other guy across the table thought for a little bit and said, you're worth it, I'll pay it. And he did. Now this creativity specialist charges $500,000 to come up with ideas. And I wish I could remember his name. I may yet during the course of the rest of this call. So the idea is we do need to respect ourselves. We don't want to give away our work. We want to charge a fair amount to respect ourselves and to deliver the perception that we are worth it. And over time, as we get better, as we get more comfortable, as we allow the good into our lives, we even want to raise our prices. It signifies a lot of things to people, but most importantly, it signifies a lot of things to yourself. You're worth it, you deserve it, and you will get it. And so those are all some thoughts from those questions.
Great. Well, that was the limit of the questions that I've listed up here. Is there any questions from the rest of you guys for Joe?
Joe, I'll throw a question at you. It's Bob Doyle.
Yes, Bob.
This is one that I get from a lot of people, and of course I have my own way of dealing with it, but one of the things I love about these kinds of conversations is I can get new ideas from folks who I'm sure get the same kind of questions. And you, having written Spiritual Marketing, I'm sure you get emails like this all the time, things along the lines of, hey, I get all that you're saying about abundance and that it's everywhere and that it's unlimited, but man, that sure isn't my experience right now. And how in the world can I shift my mental and emotional gears to get into a feeling of belief that there is unlimited abundance and that I can have some when, I'm $30,000 in debt and there doesn't seem, nothing seems to be working out for me, and I work at a job, I work 3 jobs, let's say, I definitely get people like that. Yeah. And they just cannot see any kind of way out to shift those gears.
Yeah, that's a great question, and yes, of course, I get them almost daily. My answer to that is a couple things. The first is I tell people that they are wealthier right now than a lot of people that are in third world countries, and they are wealthier right now than some of the kings and queens of the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries, and that what they're doing is focusing on the things they don't have, and they're focusing on their problems. And as long as they focus on the things they don't have and they focus on their problems, they're going to feel like crap. They're going to feel unabundant, they're going to feel ungrateful, and they're going to attract more of that. So what I tell them they need to do, and of course they don't all listen to this because they don't all allow the good into their lives, they're still coming from their own realm of belief, but what I tell them that the first thing they would need to do is to focus on what they have that they are so incredibly grateful for. Because if they looked around, they could be grateful for the very home, whether it's an apartment, it's a house, it's a cottage. They could be grateful for their transportation, whether that's the bus system or a car or a truck or a bike. They could be grateful for whatever money that they have. If they do have 3 jobs, on some ways, on some levels, that's miraculous, because there's a lot of people who are totally unemployed and would love to have 1 job. And if they are focusing on their debt, then they're not focusing on their prosperity. And if they focus on their debt, they'll probably just create more of it, because the fundamental rule in psychology, as you no doubt know, is that you get more of whatever you're focusing on. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that I do, and this is the first thing that a lot of the counselors that I worked with over the years used to do with me, is to say, let's sit down and make a sincere list of the things we're grateful for. And I mean sincere, the things you are truly grateful for. Vilma mentioned my spiritual marketing super summit that we did in Austin in January, just last month. One guy at the very end of it jumped up at the end of the program, got on stage, and wanted to announce one of the things he got from the program. He astonished me, because this guy is an ex-military man, 60 years old, pretty set in his ways, if not totally set in his ways, pretty closed and unemotional. I mean, a wonderful person, but this is kind of a description of the way I saw him. And he said that one of the things he got out of the seminar is that he made a list of all the people he had lost in his life. And he had lost his parents, he had lost other relatives, and there was like 15 people that had died, and he was really depressed about it. Then he made a list of all the people he was gaining in his life, and they were, sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters and in-laws, and he said there were like 37 names on that side. And he suddenly realized in this breakthrough level for him that he wasn't losing at all. He was gaining. And this man had tears in his eyes. So I think that's the kind of shift that somebody needs to make, that they're writing those letters, is to stop and feel gratitude for what they have. And then, of course, the second step is to start to make those intentions about what they want to have, and maybe even do the third step of writing a script of what would I feel like, what would life be like if I achieved all these things right now and I had them in my life. What kind of feelings would be in my body right at this moment? Because that will be magnetic and will start to pull it to us. Now, again, I say all of this, but it's up to the person receiving it to do whatever they do with it. But that's my own answer.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, great question, Bob.
Anybody else out there have a question? Wow. Joe, looks like you know everything.
That's pretty laughable, but flattering.
This is Sue, and I actually do have a question.
Okay.
I grew up like most of us did with you have to work hard.
Yeah.
And I learn and understand that it doesn't have to be like that. But where I go, the extreme flip side of that is I don't have to do anything. And so I'm stuck in theory and not practice. Can you help me through that?
Yeah, I will address it as best I can. First of all, yes, the whole idea that you have to work hard for a living is a belief. Mm-hmm. And that's a Puritan belief most of us in America inherited from our forefathers, and we just want to take a look at it and realize that, well, you can work hard if you want, but you don't really have to. The other flip side that you're talking about is, not doing anything at all. Then the reality of that one is, I don't know anybody, if they had tycoon status, unlimited wealth, won the lottery 5 times in a row, and had multi-billions of dollars to their name, who wouldn't do something.
Yeah.
None of us are going to lay on the beach forever. I mean, there's so many people who say, I hate my job, I just want to go lay on the beach. And the reality is, if they went and laid on the beach and they did quit their job and they had the money, they'd sooner or later get up and say, I want to go build a house, or I want to go do a painting, or I want to write a song. They would do something. And this goes back to one of Vilma's earlier questions about that whole creativity being a soul drug. I think it's in our nature to create. I think that we would never, ever be at a place where we don't do nothing in terms of how most people think about it. You just sit on a rock and you never move. We're always going to move. Our legs have got to bump us into gear. Our mind's got to say we want to go create something. So I think what we want is the balance there where we are doing what we love. When we're doing what we love, that may look like work to a lot of other people, but it won't look like work to you because you love doing it. It's much like when I'm writing books. I am incredibly focused. Narissa looks at me and she can't believe that I'm working on a book and I might get it done in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, whatever the time frame might be. But the whole rest of the world has been pretty much shut out. I mean, there's still some balance there, but I'm so focused on it that other people looking at it think, boy, he's really working hard. Well, I don't think that. I'm thinking, what a rush. I'm working on my greatest next book. I can't wait to get this out there. I can't wait for people to read it. They're going to like it. They'll like me. This may change lives. I might make some money even. I'm doing it because it's fun. And whatever looks like work to somebody else doesn't look like work to me. So I think that's where we really want to be, is to do what's fun, to go with our internal guidance system. And I don't think at that point any of what you're doing, any of that activity, will seem like hard, boring, tedious, strenuous, sweaty type things that you hate. I think it'll be what you love. Does that help?
That's given me great ideas. I think I'm going to go mining through the things that I love.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that a nice place to be, though?
Yeah.
You have the joy of going mining through the things you love. Ah, that sounds wonderful.
Maybe this is my book.
It just might be, yes.
Thank you.
Actually, that reminds me of something in your book again.
Okay.
Do what you love and sell it.
Yes. Do what you love and sell it. Yeah, I think Marcia Sinitar, I think is her name, who wrote a book, Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. I think she did a lot of people a disservice because they read the title and assumed, I will just do what I love, I will just be a massage therapist, or I will just be a poet, or I will just be a police person, or whatever it happens to be for them, and money will follow. And that's not the reality as I know it. You might have money come your way because some people may just hand it to you, but unless you have the mindset to receive and you allow it to come into your life, unless you are in that place where you can say, yes, I do want good in my life, and how good can I stand it? I can stand it wonderfully well. Unless all of that's in place, you're not going to make money. You're going to end up being the starving massage therapist who doesn't know what to charge, or the starving poet. You know, you have to know how to do what you love and then sell it. I think that's the balance of living in our world, and I think that's the whole spiritual marketing approach. That's where even the title comes from. It's not just spiritual, it's not just marketing, it's both. It's two sides of the very same coin. One side of the coin is the spirit, is the love, it's the energy, it's doing your dream. And the other side is cashing it in and paying your rent and paying your taxes and feeding yourself and making donations to worthy causes. They're not separate. It's two sides of the same coin. So that's why I said someday I'm going to write a book called Do What You Love and Then Sell It.
And can you talk about selling?
Yeah.
Because that also is a stumbling block for me, and I know that part of it has to do with what you were saying before around value.
Yes. Well, there was one woman who called me a while back and said that she absolutely hated selling. She loved what she did, but she hated selling. And I really listened to her because she went on and on for like 10 minutes. And I heard the whole thing, and I thought, I don't really like selling either. People look at what I do when they get my emails. If they sign up at MrFire.com, they're going to get emails from me because I send quite a few. And they'll think, oh, Joe's selling. But Joe doesn't think that. What Joe thinks is, I'm sharing. And I think that's the perspective transformation that needs to go in place in anybody to make this whole effort worthwhile and profitable. What I do is what you do when you see a great movie and you want other people to go see it. You don't sell them on the movie. You get excited and share your observations of the movie and tell them enough about it so they can conclude that, yeah, that might be a great movie. I'll go see it too. Well, in effect, you sold them. But you never said that, and you never tried to sell them, and you never tried to persuade them or influence them or motivate them. You shared your enthusiasm for a moment in time that you really relished, and they picked up on it. I think that's what we need to do in what's called traditional selling. Instead of going out there and trying to persuade people and sell people and do any of the things that the salespeople are taught to do, I think all we really need to do is find the things that we love and share our love for them with other people who might catch the same enthusiasm and want to go do it too. That's what I do. When I send out an email, my emails are only for products, services, or people I know, I've had experience with, I love, I'm really excited about, and I believe my list would be excited too. And what I do is share that excitement. If it comes across as selling, that's somebody's interpretation of it, but it's not selling for me. It's sharing. So I think that's really the mental shift that needs to take place.
Thank you. And I had another idea that goes along with mining what I love from that, which is to really notice what people naturally come to me for.
Yeah.
So, because I had a friend who I used to work with phoned me last night and asked me for some ideas on, she's doing a presentation and she wanted some ideas on an icebreaker. And often people come to me and ask me about presentations, creating workshops. I mean, it could be what I do. It is something that I love to do. I hadn't really thought in terms of here's where there's value. Here's where, it would not be selling for me.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think there's a clue there. It would not be selling for you. It would be fun for you, and people are already asking you for it.
Yeah.
I think it was Stuart Wilde who told me years ago, he says that when people show up at your door because of whatever it is that you do that they want more of, when people show up, bill them.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, too.
Yeah.
Well, these have been great questions. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, we are at 5 minutes due, so I think we've done very well. Joe, is there any offers that you had or any closing remarks that you'd like to share?
Well, I invite everybody to visit my main website, which is at mrfire.com, www.mrfire.com. There's plenty of articles. My entire catalog is there. You can sign up for my free newsletter. I think when you sign up, you get a 40-minute interview with me, which is probably on marketing, and you'd probably find it interesting. If you haven't read Spiritual Marketing, you can read it for free at my website. Just go to mrfire.com/spirit, and you can read the book there. Or if you prefer to have it in hardcover or paperback, go to amazon.com, and you'll find it listed there, as well as all my other books and so forth should be at Amazon. So that's what I would say. If there's any particular questions that somebody has that arise later, I don't mind you sending me an email. Send it to questions@mrfire.com, questions@mrfire.com. Be brief, to the point, and I will do my best to answer in a hopefully helpful way. And again, Velma, thank you. This has been great. You asked great questions, and so did the other people on the call. And I can't wait to listen to all your other guests. This is going to be fantastic. We have an abundance of abundance teachers. This is great.
Definitely do. And actually, I just got our last surprise speaker filled in today. So we are a full 10 speakers. We are on our way to completing this. And I guess I'll see everybody next week. Next week is Terry Levine. It's going to be at 3 o'clock Eastern again. And I look forward to seeing everyone there again.
Thank you, Velma. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.